Detroit has been quietly canceling its own safety programs for the better part of 50 years. Not because the engineering failed, because the option box did not pay for itself, the dealer did not want to explain it, or Congress overreached and the buyer revolted. Here are 10 safety features Detroit invented, tested, shipped, and abandoned anyway. Number 10, the passenger side outside mirror. The 1955 Chevrolet, Ford, or Plymouth left the assembly line with exactly one outside mirror mounted on the driver's door. The passenger side had none. The driver relied on the inside rearview mirror and on turning the head to clear the passenger side blind spot at highway speeds. A passenger side mirror was available as a dealer-installed option for approximately $18 in 1955 money, roughly $200 today. The reasoning was cost. A second mirror required a second casting, a second stock, and roughly $2 of extra assembly time on the line. Multiply by 2 million vehicles per year, and Detroit had a meaningful reason to leave the option box empty. The Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 111, effective 1971, required a driver side outside mirror, but explicitly did not require a passenger side mirror. Detroit read the letter of the rule and kept the passenger side blank until the late 1980s, when insurance data on lane change collisions finally forced the issue. Today, every passenger vehicle sold in the United States has 2 outside mirrors, plus a rear camera. Detroit did not decide the driver needed to see the passenger side. The accident statistics did. Number 9, backup lights as a delete option. American passenger cars, 1955. The 1955 American car offered backup lights as either optional equipment or standard with delete. On base model trim lines from Chevrolet and Ford, the backup light was not included at all, and the buyer paid approximately $8 extra to have it installed. On higher trim lines, the backup light was standard, but a buyer wanting to save the assembly cost could specify a delete option and receive a small credit at the dealer. A single incandescent lamp mounted low on the rear fender, wired to the transmission's neutral safety switch, illuminated automatically when the driver shifted into reverse. The purpose was equal parts illumination and communication. A driver behind the vehicle could tell the car was about to move. Federal Motor Vehicle Safety, Standard 1. 08, effective 1968, required backup lights on all passenger cars sold in the United States. The delete option disappeared with it. Today, every vehicle sold has backup lights, a rear camera, an audible warning tone, and often cross-traffic detection. Detroit didn't leave backup lights off out of principle, it left them off because the base model buyer had never asked to be seen when he reversed. Number 8, integrated automatic climate control, Chrysler Imperial, 1953. The 1953 Chrysler Imperial introduced a factory-installed automatic climate control system marketed under the Airtemp brand. Chrysler had been in the refrigeration business since the 1930s, and the Imperial system was the first American passenger car automatic climate control that combined heating, cooling, and defogging on a single dashboard thermostat. The driver set a temperature and the car balanced the airflow between windshield defrost, floor heat, and cabin ventilation without further input. The safety argument was quiet but real. A fogged windshield on a cold morning was one of the leading causes of low-speed collisions in the 1940s and 50s. Automatic climate control kept the windshield clear without asking the driver to manage 3 separate sliders at highway speed. The option cost approximately $640 in 1953 money, roughly $7,500 today. Detroit did not carry the concept down market. Chevrolet and Ford kept the manual heater defroster slider on their base models through the 1980s. Automatic climate control did not become standard on non-luxury American vehicles until the mid-1990s. Chrysler didn't invent the defogged windshield, it just proved the driver would pay to stop thinking about it. Number 7, the center high-mounted stop lamp. Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, 1978. The Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow of the late 1970s carried a small red brake light mounted in the center of the rear parcel shelf, visible through the rear window from the driver's seat of the car behind. The lamp illuminated in parallel with the 2 rear taillight brake lamps. The purpose was to add a third eye-level signal in the center of the vehicle, a signal the trailing driver's brain would process faster than a peripheral lamp at the fender corners. The engineering data was compelling. Dr. John Voevodsky, a psychologist working with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in the late 1970s, ran a fleet study on San Francisco taxis and demonstrated that the center high-mounted stop lamp reduced rear-end collisions by approximately 50%. Detroit read the data and did nothing until Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 1. 08 required the center brake light on all 1986 model year passenger cars. Rolls-Royce shipped it in 1978. Detroit shipped it in 1986. The 8-year gap cost lives. Detroit didn't decide the third brake light was unnecessary. It decided nobody was going to make them install it, and then somebody did. Number 6. Four-wheel disc brakes. Crosley Hotshot, 1949. The Crosley Hotshot was a small American sports car built by the Crosley Corporation of Cincinnati, Ohio, priced at approximately $850 in 1949. The car came standard with four-wheel hydraulic disc brakes, an engineering feature not available on any Cadillac, Lincoln, or Chrysler of the era. The discs were manufactured by the Auto Specialties Manufacturing Company of St. Joseph, Michigan, under the trade name Osco Lambert. Instead of a drum surrounding a pair of expanding shoes, each wheel carried a solid steel disc gripped by hydraulic caliper pistons. Braking energy went straight through the disc into the air. The system worked in dry conditions and produced substantially shorter stopping distances than the drum brakes on every other American car of the era. The friction was corrosion. The discs and the caliper contact surfaces were carbon steel and rusted rapidly in road salt and coastal air. Within 2 years, the Crosley's brakes were seizing. Crosley reverted to drum brakes for the 1951 model year. Disc brakes did not return to an American production passenger car until 1965. Detroit had watched the Crosley experiment fail, blamed the concept rather than the metallurgy, and lost 16 years. Crosley didn't fail to sell disc brakes. American metallurgy of 1949 failed to keep them from rusting. Number 5. Motorized automatic seatbelts. American passenger cars, 1981. The Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 208 required passive restraints on all passenger cars sold in the United States, starting in 1989. Passive meant automatic. The restraint had to engage without any action from the driver. American manufacturers had two options: install an airbag or install a motorized shoulder belt that ran on a track along the doorframe and pulled itself across the driver's chest when the door closed. Detroit chose the motorized belt. Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler installed motorized belts on a large portion of their 1989 and 1991 lineup: the Ford Escort, the Chevrolet Cavalier, the Chrysler LeBaron. The belt ran on a small electric motor mounted at the base of the B-pillar and reached the shoulder harness anchor point when the door was closed. A lap belt still had to be buckled manually. The mechanism worked reliably in the showroom. In the field, the belt motors failed often. The tracks jammed on cold mornings, and drivers unclipped the belt at the shoulder anchor and let it hang. By 1995, driver-side airbags had become standard equipment on all American passenger cars. The motorized seatbelt disappeared within 18 months. Detroit had built 10 million of them, then abandoned the entire architecture. The motorized belt didn't fail as an engineering solution. It failed the moment the airbag became a cheaper way to satisfy the same regulation. Number 4. The collapsible steering column. General Motors passenger cars, 1967. The American car, before 1967, had a rigid steel steering column that ran from the steering wheel to the steering box mounted on the front axle at an angle roughly parallel to the driver's chest. In a frontal collision, the front axle steering box moved rearward, driving the column into the driver's torso like a battering ram. The mortality statistics were consistent and awful. Impalement injuries from the steering column were among the top 3 causes of frontal crash fatality across the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. The engineering solution had been known since aircraft ejection seat design of the 1950s. A telescoping mesh section in the middle of the column would collapse under longitudinal load, absorbing the impact energy and preventing the column from reaching the driver. General Motors introduced the collapsible steering column as standard equipment on 1967 Chevrolet, Buick, and Cadillac lines. Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 203, effective January 1, 1968, mandated the feature across the American industry. Ford and Chrysler had spent 1965 and 1966 lobbying against the standard on cost grounds, but the mandate went through anyway. Today, every passenger vehicle sold in the United States has a collapsible steering column along with a driver's side airbag, 3-point seatbelts, and an anti-submarining seat cushion. General Motors didn't invent driver safety in 1967. It just proved that Detroit could build the feature the moment Congress made it mandatory. Number 3, the seatbelt interlock ignition lockout. American passenger cars, 1974. The motor vehicle safety standard applied to the 1974 model year required a device that would prevent the car from starting if the driver's seatbelt was not fastened. The rule was called the seatbelt interlock. Every American passenger car sold in 1974 included the device. A pressure sensor in the driver's seat detected occupancy. A latch sensor in the buckle detected engagement. If the seat was occupied and the belt was not buckled, the ignition circuit refused to engage the starter motor. On some cars, a warning buzzer added to the effect. The buyer's response was catastrophic. Drivers set groceries on the passenger seat and could not start their cars. Drivers with heavy toolboxes on the seat triggered the interlock. Drivers with children who unbuckled during a stop could not restart. The complaints reached Congress within 4 months. The Motor Vehicle and School Bus Safety Amendments of 1974, signed by Gerald Ford in October of that year, repealed the interlock requirement. The device was retrofitted out of every model year, 74 car by dealer service departments over the following 12 months. It has never returned. Modern seatbelt reminders will chime, will flash a dashboard warning, will refuse to allow cruise control. They will not stop the car from starting. The interlock didn't fail because it did not work. It failed because Congress underestimated how much a driver would resent his own dashboard telling him what to do. Number 2, four-wheel anti-lock braking. Chrysler Imperial LeBaron, 1971. The engineering behind anti-lock braking had been proven in aircraft landing gear systems during and after the Second World War. Bendix Corporation adapted the technology to a passenger car in 1971 and licensed the system to Chrysler for installation on the Imperial LeBaron. The option was called SureBrake. The mechanism ran a small tone wheel sensor at each of the four-wheel hubs. An electronic control unit under the dashboard read the wheel speeds 20 times per second, detected impending lockup, and cycled the hydraulic brake pressure through solenoid valves at up to 10 times per second. When the driver stood on the brake pedal, the wheels did not lock. The car steered under maximum deceleration on any surface, including wet pavement, gravel, and light ice. The option cost $344, or roughly $2,900 in modern money. Chrysler produced approximately 420 SureBrake Imperials across 2 model years. The consumer buyer did not understand the option. The dealer could not demonstrate it without causing brake fade in the showroom lot. Chrysler dropped the option after the 1972 model year. Anti-lock braking returned to the American market on the 1978 Mercedes-Benz S-Class using a Bosch electronic system. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler took another 20 years to make it standard. The SureBrake didn't lose the market. The market of 1971 was not prepared to be told its own braking instinct was wrong. Number 1, the air cushion restraint system. General Motors, 1974. In the fall of 1973, General Motors offered a factory option that no other manufacturer in the world had ever commercialized. The Oldsmobile 88, the Buick Electra, and the Cadillac Fleetwood were available with an air cushion restraint system, a driver's side airbag, a knee bolster, and a passenger side airbag mounted in the dashboard glove box area. Order sheet code letters ACRS. The option cost approximately $300 or $2,200 in modern money. The airbag was a nylon fiber pillow packed into a housing behind a plastic cover on the steering wheel hub and inside the dashboard. A pyrotechnic charge triggered by a mechanical accelerometer sensing frontal deceleration above roughly 12 miles per hour inflated the pillow with pressurized nitrogen in approximately 30 milliseconds. The driver's face and torso met a rapidly inflating cushion rather than the steering wheel or the windshield. Crash test data collected by General Motors and independently verified by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety demonstrated a mortality reduction of roughly 30% in frontal collisions. The public did not buy the option. General Motors sold approximately 10,000 air cushion-equipped cars across the 1974, 75, and 76 model years, a rate of roughly 1 in 5,000 qualifying vehicles. Dealers did not understand how to explain the safety feature. Buyers assumed the system would deploy accidentally in a fender bender and cost them a repair bill they did not want to face. General Motors killed the program at the end of the 1976 model year and moved on. Driver-side airbags returned to American production in 1988 on the Chrysler LeBaron. Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 208 required driver-side airbags on all passenger cars by 1998, 24 years after General Motors had shipped the first working system. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration estimates airbags have saved approximately 50,000 American lives since widespread adoption. General Motors didn't fail to sell the airbag. The American buyer of 1974 failed to imagine the collision he was about to have. Looking across all 10 safety features, the pattern is uncomfortable. Not one of these features failed as engineering. Every one of them was shipped, tested, verified in crash data, and quietly canceled because the dealer could not sell it, because the buyer did not understand it, because Congress overreached and consumer backlash forced a repeal, or because the accountants ran the option box against the assembly line minute and decided the safety feature was not carrying its weight. Safety in the American automotive industry has almost never lost the engineering argument. It has consistently lost the marketing argument, and the difference between the two is measured in bodies.